Hello, I am Leanne Miley, and I am happy to share with you my quantitative article analysis for Ed 800 Introduction to Educational Research. For my analysis, I have chosen Jennifer Farley's article entitled Teachers as Obligated Bystanders, Grading and Relating Administrator Support and Peer Response to Teacher Direct Intervention in School Bullying. This article was written in 2018 and investigates factors that impact a teacher's ability or likelihood to intervene in incidences in school bullying. In this study, Farley is collecting data on whether teachers can correctly identify what constitutes school bullying, as well as aims to investigate what impact bystanders, such as administration and other teachers, have on a teacher's likelihood to intervene. Her study is unique because she is using 5 video scenarios rather than vignettes to collect her data, and she will be applying the bystander intervention theory to further investigate what influences a teacher's ability to intervene. Why is research important? Before this class, I never fully understood the research process nor fully appreciate the time and effort individuals put into creating meaningful and beneficial research. More importantly, I didn't fully understand the purpose of research and how it can benefit me as an educator. Since being enrolled in this program, I have read, most times begrudgingly, several educational articles. I truly wish I had taken this class when I first started in this program because it has significantly changed my perspective on research. Research is a vital part of academic and professional growth, and I personally believe not enough emphasis is placed on the importance of it and what we as educators can learn from it. For me personally, gaining knowledge about, for example, the steps in the research process, understanding the different types of research, and most importantly, recognizing the purpose of research. This has made it feel way more relevant and meaningful. Although I am still new at applying my analytical lens to various articles, I do feel more confident in being able to determine, for example, if an abstract highlights the key components of a study or if the literature review contains detailed and recent literature about the research problem. My improved confidence has also deepened my understanding of the broader purpose of educational research, whether qualitative or quantitative. Cresswell reminds us that research has key 3 purposes: to add to the knowledge base, to improve practice, and to inform policy debates. Farley's study is quantitative in nature. In quantitative research, researchers seek to explain relationships among variables. Their purpose statements, research questions, and hypotheses are specific, measurable, and observable. They collect numerical data and then analyze that data to uncover patterns, relationships, or trends. In quantitative research, researchers seek to explain rather than explore, and analyzing this quantitative article has definitely required a shift in my mindset. Quantitative researchers often ask how many, how often, what is the difference, what are the factors, what percentage. As I continue with my analysis of Farley's article, my goal is to apply my understanding of the key components of quantitative research. I aim to identify what I believe are the strengths of Farley's work while also providing feedback on areas that I believe could be improved or that require further clarification. An abstract is a brief overview of the study and should include a summary of the study's purpose and key findings, briefly state information on a sample population or subjects, review key findings relating to the proposed study, be clear and concise. I believe Farley's abstract is brief, it lacks clarity, and omits several key components of the study. She attempts to explain the study's purpose by stating that this study applied a theory of bystander intervention to teachers and has proven to have much utility in understanding how other bystanders may influence a teacher's direct intervention. I did find that the use of the word utility very confusing, as it vaguely implies practicality or usefulness without being specific. While it seems she is suggesting the theory was helpful in understanding teacher behavior, I believe replacing utility with a clearer term, perhaps such as improve or increase, would make the purpose of the study easier to grasp and more quantitative in nature. Farley also overuses the words utility and utilize when describing who was involved in this study, what instruments were used, and how quantitative methods were applied. In my opinion, this repetition makes the abstract hard to follow. I also feel the research design in Farley's abstract lacks depth and clarity. Although she mentions the use of quantitative methods, I think the abstract would be much stronger if it included a few more specifics about her study, such as that it was a quasi-experimental design and perhaps more information about the video scenarios. I believe that by adding this kind of information, this would give readers a much better understanding of how the study was structured and how the data was collected. Farley notes that 63 middle school teachers participated in this study by completing online surveys, but I was left wondering what the video scenarios involved and how they were connected to the survey responses. This lack of explanation created a bit of a disconnect for me, making it fully difficult to understand the study's focus, specifically on teacher intervention and school bullying. She also highlights peer responses and administrator support as key factors influencing teacher intervention, which I did find valuable. However, I feel she misses an important opportunity to connect these findings to the study's methodology. Once again, the use of the video analysis and surveys. Furthermore, while she does emphasize the significance of these factors, I would have liked to see her extend the discussion to include how these insights could inform broader practices within the field of education. This would have added greater depth, more practical relevance, and add impact to the study's overall effectiveness. An introduction in a research study is critical in setting the stage for the entire study. It establishes the issue or concern and justification for the author's research. In quantitative research, it is important for the author to state the topic and address the problem by understanding what factors or variables influence the outcome. Cresswell states that research problems are educational issues, controversies, or concerns that guide the need for conducting a study. In Farley's study, the research problem centers around school bullying, an educational issue that guides the need for her investigation. To effectively capture the reader's attention, a strong introduction needs a clear and compelling narrative hook. This hook should use engaging, accessible language that immediately draws the reader into the study. Farley does an adequate job of introducing the topic of school bullying by acknowledging its well-documented negative effects and referencing the policy and pragmatic efforts aimed at addressing it. She also points out that much of the existing literature focuses on students' experiences and actions. However, I felt that Farley's hook lacked the spark needed to truly captivate my interest. It came across as somewhat vague and overly wordy. I would have liked her to elaborate on what she meant by the adverse effects of bullying and clarify what policy and pragmatic efforts entail. The introduction could have been more impactful by incorporating dynamic language or even including compelling statistics to draw myself and other readers in. When researchers fail to establish a strong opening, they risk losing their audience's attention, like mine, which may lead readers to disengage or seek information elsewhere. Cresswell states that just because something can be researched does not mean it should be. A well-justified research problem becomes evident when the researcher asks, "What is the need for this study?" or "What specific problem influenced the decision to conduct this research?" Farley does an excellent job of emphasizing the significance of her research problem. She begins by noting that much of the existing literature on school bullying focuses primarily on students' experiences and behaviors. To underscore the need for a broader perspective, Farley references Dwan and Bradshaw's research on the role of teachers and cites Swear Espialage, who argue that bullying is rarely examined across ecological systems. This highlights a gap in the research. a lack of holistic understanding of bullying, and the role teachers play in intervening. To justify and support her research problem, Farley begins by defining bullying as unwanted, aggressive behavior among school-aged children that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. She emphasizes that bullying can take many forms, both direct and indirect, including physical, verbal, and social acts, as well as property damage. By including a clear definition, Farley ensures that the reader fully understands what bullying is and the impact it can have on children, highlighting the importance of this educational issue. Defining key terms like bullying helps everyone understand the topic in the same way. This gives Farley's study a clear starting point and helps prevent confusion later on. Farley further strengthens the importance of her research by reviewing existing literature on the long-term effects of bullying. Totfi, Farrington, Losel, and Lober, for example, found a strong correlation between bullying behavior and future criminal offending. According to Alwies, children who are targets of bullying are more likely to experience low self-esteem and depression. Wilkie, Copeland, and company report that chronic bullying can lead to academic struggles and even poverty and job instability in adulthood. These findings reinforce the seriousness of the issue of school bullying, highlighting the need for continued research. I do believe Farley's research problem can be investigated using a quantitative approach. This method allows her to collect numerical data by using a survey instrument and then analyzing the responses statistically to identify patterns and relationships. Her research does include measurable variables, and since this is a pilot study using actual video scenarios to test whether teachers can correctly identify incidences of bullying, this does align well with a quantitative design. That being said, I do have some concerns with her design. In particular, I do believe this study might have been more effective if she used a mixed methods approach, which could capture not just what teachers do, but why they responded the way that they did. Overall, Farley does a strong job of justifying why her research problem is worth investigating. She highlights the lack of existing literature on the role of teachers in bullying incidences and applies the bystander intervention theory to explore the factors such as administrator support, peer influence that affect a teacher's decision to intervene. However, one area so far that seems to be underdeveloped in her study is the practical implication or application of her findings. While she identifies the gaps, it's not entirely clear how her results could be used in real educational settings, although I do believe there is value in that. I am left wondering, why do these findings matter and how can they help improve teacher training, perhaps school policy or student outcomes? I do believe by her addressing these questions, this would strengthen the impact of her work. According to Massing, a literature review is an overview of scholarly literature on a particular topic that contains analysis and interpretation. Its purpose is to identify a topic worth studying, build an understanding of what is already known, refine the research plan, and define key terms and constructs. Cresswell adds that in quantitative research, the literature review typically appears at the beginning of a study and plays a key role in justifying the research problem and shaping research questions. Farley follows this approach by using her literature review to highlight the lack of research on teacher intervention in school bullying and to frame her study using existing data. Farley's literature review includes information from both older studies and more recent ones. She explores teacher intervention in bullying, citing research that shows teachers are often hesitant to step in when it's not clear how to act when there are others around. For example, she references the concept of role ambiguity, where teachers may be unsure when or how to respond. She also draws on the literature to examine how personal responsibility and school expectations and norms influence a teacher's decision to act. These references lay a strong foundation for her research, showing that multiple internal and external factors will influence a teacher's decision to intervene. strengthens her theoretical framework by applying the bystander intervention theory to teachers as adult bystanders in bullying incidents. She references Rigby to highlight the role of perceived school support in shaping teacher responses, and cites Yoon to explore how context influences one's decision making. I found this approach effective because it expands the typical student-centered application of the theory and instead puts teachers as key figures whose actions or inactions can significantly influence bullying dynamics. This theoretical lens provides a helpful way to understand the complex social environment within schools and aligns well with Farley's aim to explore what drives teacher behavior in these scenarios. Farley's literature review also examines how teachers' perceptions of bullying influence their willingness to intervene. She notes that responses often vary depending on the type of bullying and the level of seriousness teachers assign to it. For example, Craig, Henderson, and Murphy found that physical bullying is viewed as more serious than verbal or social forms, while Haesler suggests that teachers are less likely to intervene in cases of relational or verbal bullying. I think this highlights an important issue that certain forms of bullying may be overlooked, which suggests a need for more training and awareness among educators. In addition to examining a teacher's role in bullying scenarios, Farley addresses a significant gap in the research, the influence of administrator support and peer norms on teacher responses. She explains that teachers are more likely to report bullying if they feel supported by their administration. Some may remain silent out of fear that their classroom management skills will be judged. I found this point particularly compelling as it brings attention to the systemic and social pressures that impact teacher behavior, areas that are often underexplored in the literature. Farley's review effectively identifies these research gaps and makes a strong case for her study's relevance. By combining theoretical insights with the recent literature, she successfully frames her research within current conversations about school climate, the social norms, and teacher responsibility. Her use of subheadings helps guide me, the reader, through her complex idea and supports my ability to understand the research. While I found Farley provided extensive justification for her research, and I found that her literature review was done well, I did find it difficult to engage with the literature review because it wasn't clear at times if I was actually reading the literature review. Without a distinct heading that indicated review of the literature, I found it difficult to determine where the review ended and other sections began. Personally, I would have appreciated a clearer structure to help me stay focused and better understand how the research background supported her study. Despite this issue, Farley's writing is, for the most part, generally clear and well supported. Her references are current for the most part, and she follows the APA formatting guidelines. Overall, I think her literature review does lay a strong foundation for her research, even though I believe a few structural improvements could have made it a little bit easier to read. According to Cresswell, a purpose statement advances the overall direction or focus of the study. It establishes the intent of the entire study, and it should be clear, specific, and informative. In a good quantitative purpose statement, it should identify the variables in the study and the relationship, who the participants are, and where is the research site. It should state the researchers' reasons for conducting the study and what they want to accomplish. The study of purpose in this article was difficult to identify. Farley does not follow the recommended scripts Creswell suggests, and hence I found it difficult to locate. I found myself rereading sections of the article in frustration, trying to locate the purpose statement. If I was not conducting an analysis of this article, I would have dropped this article and chosen a different one. This highlights the importance of researchers having a clear purpose statement. Eventually, I do believe I found Farley's purpose statement in the first sentence of the second paragraph under the introduction section. From what I can tell, I think Farley's statement of purpose is stated over two sentences. So rather than using a conventional script such as the purpose of this, Farley states the intention of her study by stating the following. This study sought to build upon the limited literature related to the role of the teacher in identifying and intervening in school bullying. She states that the bystander intervention theory will be applied, but it is unclear how or why. As well, at this point, it is not easy to identify the variables or what is being measured. So I am confused as to exactly what Farley is measuring or hoping to discover. However, in the second sentence, Farley provides more details about her study, which gives me a better understanding of her statement of purpose. She identifies the research strategy used in the study, which is a survey instrument. She identifies the participants, middle school teachers, and what information or factors that, and I quote, she will be collecting data on. The lack of clarity with Farley's purpose statement makes it difficult to determine how the variables will be measured and what their relationship is, or if there is one. In quantitative research, the dependent variable is the outcome or effect being measured, while the independent variable is the cause or a manipulation that influences the outcome. In this study, I believe the dependent variable is direct teacher intervention, and the independent variables in this study are the factors such as the presence or behavior of bystanders regarding bullying, um, anything that may influence the likelihood of a teacher intervening in school bullying incidences. According to Cresswell, research questions serve as a critical link between the purpose of a study and the specific issues being investigated. They narrow the broad purpose statement into focused inquiries that the researcher seeks to address. In quantitative research, these questions typically aim to explore the relationships among variables. According to Cresswell, researchers construct hypotheses to make a prediction about the outcome of relationship among attributes or characteristics. These hypotheses provide a framework for testing these relationships systematically. However, when research questions or hypotheses are not clearly stated, like in this article, it becomes challenging to understand the objectives and the intentions of the study. This lack of clarity makes me question what the purpose of the author's work is. Without a clear understanding of the research questions or hypotheses, readers like myself struggle to discern the core focus of the study and the specific outcomes the researcher aims to achieve. Farley's study uses a quasi-experimental design using quantitative methods to examine a teacher's ability to identify bullying as well as their likelihood of intervening. Data was collected through online surveys distributed via Qualtrics and analyzed using SPSS Statistics 22. According to the Center of Innovation and Research of Learning, a quasi-experimental design introduces an intervention to participants without random assignment or a traditional control group. In Farley's study, the intervention was a set of video scenarios depicting various bullying situations in elementary, middle school, and high school situations. This method allowed Farley to present controlled, standardized situations to each participant, helping her measure how consistently teachers could recognize bullying behaviors. While this is a unique approach, it increases the internal validity through uniform exposure. However, it may not fully reflect the complexity of actual real-life school environments where context, relationships, and distractions influence a teacher's perception and decision-making when it comes to bullying. Farley aimed to make the stimuli more realistic and engaging by using the video scenarios, which is commendable, instead of the traditional written descriptions with open-ended questions. However, it is unclear whether the video content was pilot tested for reliability or reviewed for bias, factors that could influence how different teachers interpret the scenarios. Farley chose not to use a control group or random assignment, which fits with a quasi-experimental design, commonly used in working with existing groups, like teachers. Instead of changing or controlling the variables, she observed how teachers naturally responded, Her goal was to explore relationships between things like teacher confidence, understanding of their role, and how they respond to bullying rather than to prove a direct cause and effect relationship. The unit of analysis in Farley's study was the individual teacher, while the population consisted of middle school teachers in two Midwestern school districts. Both districts were in urbanized areas and followed the same state-mandated anti-bullying policies and code of ethics. These shared guidelines proved consistency across the sample, allowing Farley to compare teacher responses across districts more confidently. Farley clearly defined her target population as teachers of students in grades 6 to 8, which makes sense developmentally as middle school is a time when many bullying behaviors tend to rise. However, she did not explain why only these two districts were chosen. It is unclear whether the findings can be generalized to rural districts, high schools, or other regions. Farley invited 535 teachers to participate in her study. Participation was voluntary, which aligns with ethical research standards. Although Farley states that she obtained consent from the participants, it is unclear how she collected the consent forms. Written agreements, digital agreements, not clear. Furthermore, Farley does not provide information whether information was shared with participants about the study, nor what steps were taken to ensure the participants' confidentiality and anonymity. It is also interesting to note that the survey was conducted entirely online. While this approach may have been convenient and improved accessibility for both Farley and the participants, it could have also introduced a sampling bias if certain teachers, for example, those less comfortable with technology, chose not to participate because it was fully online. Farley admits that her sample might be biased. She recognizes that the teachers who chose to participate in her study might not represent the broader group of teachers she intended to study. Thus, she may not have adhered to strict probabilistic methods, meaning she likely didn't follow a true random sampling process in which every member of the population had an equal chance of being selected. This introduces the risk of selection bias, particularly if the teachers who chose to participate differed significantly from those who did not. For example, in their attitudes toward bullying or confidence in intervening in bullying incidences. As a result, the external validity of this study is weakened, making it more difficult to generalize the findings to a wider population of teachers. Farley does not specify when or where the data was collected for her study. Farley's study is unique in that it pilots a teacher survey focused on school bullying. As mentioned, the primary instrument was a study and it was online and it was distributed through Qualtrics. The survey included 5 video scenarios depicting different types of student behavior, some clearly bullying and others not so obvious. The scenarios represented various forms of bullying, physical, verbal, and relational. Participants watched the video clips and then responded to a series of questions, including whether they believed the behavior was indeed bullying and how they would respond. Interesting to note that Farley did mention that no formal definition of bullying was provided to the participants, and I thought that was very interesting. I thought that would have been a key operational definition for her to include so there is no confusion. And thus, participants were left to rely on their own personal interpretation of what they believe bullying is. Farley also does not clarify whether participants had a time limit to respond to the survey and the video scenarios, or how the video content was developed or validated. While she notes that the study was approved by the university's review board, she does not offer specific information on how she created her survey instrument, how it was designed or tested. And as we've learned from Cresswell, there is a procedure and he recommends different steps to, in fact, develop an instrument for a study. In addition to the video-based questions, the survey included scaled items to assess factors such as teacher self-efficacy, administrator support, peer response, and personal experiences with bullying. The survey used a range of question types, including dichotomous yes-no questions, nominal and ordinal scales, such as Likert scales, to gather more data. Interesting to note that Farley measured a number of key variables in her studies according to different ways, different measurement scales. For example, teacher accuracy was calculated as an accuracy rate, which was interesting to me as well, because I feel like that could be um, up to interpretation. And it was based on the number of video scenarios a participant correctly identified as bullying. Teacher responses were measured through a list of possible responses ranging from direct intervention, for example, stopping the behavior, to more passive strategies, either ignoring or delaying the action. Administrator support was measured using a 6 Likert scale, items assessing how supported teachers feel by school leadership. And I would have been really interested to see what some of the questions were actually like. Peer response measured with 3 items addressing perceptions of how other school staff respond to bullying. And self-efficacy measured using 2 items, one assessing confidence in identifying bullying and the other on confidence in responding. However, Farley does not mention how these kind of abstract concepts in her study were actually turned into measurable variables, which is something that I think would be incredibly important. Finally, scale of measurement for demographics, data on age, gender, race, years of experience, and training were collected using dichotomous categories, which added to her measurement scales. In quantitative research, validity refers to whether an instrument truly measures what it claims to measure, while reliability refers to the consistency of results under similar conditions. According to Criswell, both are essential for ensuring the trustworthiness and generalizability of a study's findings. Because Farley's study uses a pilot version of the survey, concerns about both validity and reliability arise. While the video-based format does add a sense of authenticity and reality and engagement, Farley does not provide evidence that the video scenarios or survey items were tested for accuracy, clarity, or validity. She does not cite previous studies using similar tools or indicate whether how the instrument was designed or whether the instrument was evaluated by experts before she used it. Furthermore, Farley does not indicate how the survey was administered, nor does she indicate how she was going to ensure there was no participant bias or error. Farley also doesn't mention any reliability testing, such as checking if the survey questions were consistent, or testing the survey with a smaller group first. Unfortunately, this is a major weakness in her study. Without clear definitions and a tested survey, participants might have understood the videos and questions in different ways, which makes the data less reliable and harder to compare. Overall, I do feel that Farley has good intentions with her methodology. She does explore a relevant and important topic, and her use of video scenarios brings kind of a new and creative element to the topic of school bullying. However, the lack of detail about the instrument, how her instrument was developed, the validation, her sampling strategy, and just the data collection and administers, it just kind of weakens her foundation of her study. And without addressing these components, it is difficult to trust the accuracy of her findings or to replicate this particular study in the future. According to Criswell, a results section should include tables that summarize statistical information, figures such as charts, pictures, and drawings that portray variables and their relationship, and a detailed explanation about the statistical results. Since Farley does not explicitly state a hypothesis or research questions in this study, I cannot answer if the results or stats are consistent with the research questions or hypothesis. The results from Farley's research are as follows. Results indicate that peer response and administrator support have a significant impact on a teacher's direct intervention in incidences of school bullying. Secondly, results also suggest that all teachers do not perceive administrator support or effective peer response in incidents of school bullying. In the results section, Farley discusses the results of her research by breaking it into the following sections: accuracy, administrator support, peer response, and efficacy. Farley has included two tables in this section, one that's entitled Distribution of Administrator Support Grades by School District, and the second one is the distribution of peer response grades by school district. While the tables are a great visual, researchers need to describe in detail the results of the statistical tests for people like me who are novice at understanding the data. This is known as the presentation of results, and it is crucial. To further analyze the results of Farley's study, I'm going to discuss a number of concerns that Farley does mention, as well as I have about her research. First of all, their low response rate. Out of 127 teachers who accessed the survey, only about half completed it, I believe 63 participants, which resulted in a response rate of just 11.78%. And that is alarmingly low, especially in educational research, where I believe it's Cresswell that indicates we often look for response rates of 50% or higher to consider the results representative. Cresswell emphasizes that a strong response rate is essential in survey research to ensure findings can be generalized to the larger population. With such a small and incomplete sample, I worry the results do not reflect the broader experiences or perspectives of teachers. While I understand that online surveys are convenient and can reach many participants quickly, and you can collect data in a very quick manner, they do come with drawbacks, many of which showed up in Farley's study. Technical issues like the firewall that blocked access to video content for the districts clearly played a role in reducing participation. I have experienced similar tech-related barriers in my own work, so I can appreciate how frustrating that must have been for both the researcher and participants. In addition to the technical issues, online surveys can also unintentionally exclude people. Those, as I mentioned before, teachers who aren't comfortable with technology or who don't check email frequently might never respond, even after they had said that they would participate. Cresswell also points out that non-probability sampling and low response rates can make it harder to draw accurate conclusions about the broader population. What stood out to me is that another thing that stood out to me is that Farley didn't mention using any strategies to boost her response rate, like reminder emails or incentives. I was fascinated about learning about this in Cresswell's chapter. Cresswell recommends using follow-ups and multiple points to increase participation. I think applying some of these strategies could definitely have made a real difference in Farley's study. To Farley's credit, she does acknowledge that the low response rate and small sample size make her study vulnerable to type 2 error, which is when real effects go undetected because of insufficient statistical power. Still, I think a little more effort on her part to increase participation, or even just more transparency about her recruitment process, would have strengthened her study. The demographics reported in Farley's study reflect a largely homogeneous sample. 95% of participants identified as white, 63.93% were female. This lack of diversity limits the external validity of the findings, particularly when considering more diverse educational environments. Cresswell emphasizes that in educational research, and especially when addressing sensitive issues like bullying, it is crucial to include diverse and representative samples. Doing so ensures that the study captures a broader range of experiences and cultural perspectives that may influence how bullying is identified, interpreted, and how teachers intervene in bullying incidences. Farley identifies several limitations of her study. First, she acknowledges that only a small number of teachers from 2 Midwest communities participated in her study, which has increased the chance of type 2 error and limited the generalizability of her findings. She also notes possible selection bias, since teachers with personal interest or experience in bullying may have been more likely to participate. Secondly, the study used just 5 video clips, which may not fully represent the range of bullying situations teachers face. As well, there was no definition of bullying. Farley also doesn't discuss the diversity of students in the videos, even though the research shows that gender and ethnicity can affect how teachers respond. Since the survey asked teachers how they would respond to bullying, it may not truly reflect how they actually might behave in real time situations. Farley notes that responses could be influenced by social factors, meaning teachers may have chosen answers that seemed more acceptable. The limitations of Farley's study have several important consequences that I have already in some sections addressed. The findings, they cannot be generalized to all teachers due to small homogeneous sample. The validity of the survey is limited and it may not measure real life behavior. Many biases such as self-selection, there's demographic biases in video scenarios as well as social bias. Farley recommends future studies with larger, more diverse samples and broader inclusion of school staff to improve reliability. For further research, Farley does note that since the study only included middle school teachers, Farley does suggest that future research should involve other grade levels and school staff, such as counselors and support workers, to better understand school-wide responses to bullying. In the discussion section, Farley explains that administrator support, peer response, and the school environment strongly influence whether teachers step in during bullying situations. She connects this to the bystander intervention theory to indicate and to show that teachers, like students, are affected by how others react. Farley also draws on ecological models of bullying, which highlight how teacher behavior is shaped by the broader school culture. What stood out to me was that despite their importance, administrator and peer support were rated low, unfortunately. Farley suggests that improving these areas could lead to more consistent teacher intervention and fewer bullying incidences. And this is the practical application of her research. Even though teachers care, they may hesitate if they don't feel supported or confident. Farley also found that administrator support is closely tied to teacher self-efficacy, their confidence in handling bullying. And I've experienced this myself. When I know leadership is supportive of me, I feel more confident in intervening. The same goes for peer influence. Seeing colleagues take bullying seriously encourages me to do the same, while silence can cause doubt. Analysis for Ed 800 Introduction to Educational Research. Thank you for listening to my presentation. My apologies for it being quite long.